In the remote town of Riverstone, Montana, the morning mist hung heavy over the rolling hills, shrouding everything in a ghostly embrace. 6 sleek black SUVs rolled silently through the vale, their presence ominous against the pristine landscape. Inside, the soldiers of the Los Angeles Cartel, known for their ruthless efficiency, exuded confidence. They were ready to orchestrate yet another hostile takeover, one that they believed would go as smoothly as all the others. At Silver Pine Ranch, Victor Sullivan stood at the threshold of her property, coffee steaming in her mug. She surveyed her land with a level gaze, her posture exuding an aura of quiet authority. At her feet, her 3 wolf dogs, Alpha, Beta, and Delta, sat in perfect formation, their eyes scanning the surroundings, ever vigilant. The incoming SUVs had not gone unnoticed. "This won't end well for them," Victoria murmured, her voice steady as she took another sip of the steaming brew. She casually touched the wolf pendant around her neck, a talisman from her military days, a reminder of her training and purpose. Each of her canine companions had earned their stripes in the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, honed into lethal hunting machines by both training and instinct. As the SUVs closed the distance, Victoria's mind raced through her tactical options. The cartel thought they were dealing with an unsuspecting rancher, but they were about to become the prey in a deadly game. "Alpha, watch for movement," she commanded. The white wolf's head snapped up, ears alert, sensing the tension in the air. The SUVs stopped, and out stepped men clad in tailored suits, their polished exteriors belying the dark purpose behind their visit. Victoria's heart raced. Their arrogance was palpable, and their confidence would soon lead them to underestimate her. They approached the door where Victoria stood, unwavering. "Miss Sullivan," the apparent leader greeted her, his smile thin but disarming. "We were hoping to discuss your property." "My ranch isn't for sale," Victoria replied, her voice cutting through the morning air like a knife. Delta let out a low growl, sensing the smell of intrusion. "Every property has a price." The man's tone shifted, revealing a hint of menace. "You may want to reconsider. The market can be unpredictable." Victoria felt her heart rate spike. The threats were subtle, yet they lingered in the sharpness of his eyes. She wouldn't be intimidated. "Be careful making threats in my town, friend," she warned, her voice steady as a mountain beneath them. "Some of us bite back." The men exchanged glances, confusion mingling with a trace of fear. They had expected submission from her, not defiance. With their egos bruised, they retreated to their vehicles, but not without issuing a warning. "You'll regret this, Victoria," the leader hissed before they sped away, tires screeching on the gravel road. Victoria turned back to the ranch, her gaze hardening. She knew the pulse on her property would soon be tested. The cartel was not one to back down easily, but she was prepared. They may think they are wolves, but they've never met a pack like hares. That evening, the air grew colder as the sun dipped below the horizon. Victoria gathered her core team, her father Patrick, Sheriff Thompson, and Dr. Jennifer Lee. Each had a vested interest in defending Riverstone. They sketched out their plans on an open barn door, strategizing protection of their community. "We need to prepare for an imminent attack," Thompson warned, looking each of them in the eye. "They might try to intimidate us further, cut phone lines, block roads, standard cartel tactics." Victoria nodded. She'd seen their playbook time and again, but had learned to counter each move. "They are not just after this ranch," she replied steadily. "They want control over everything, but Riverstone isn't their playground. We'll stand and fight." A tense silence settled over the group as they discussed plans, but that night, sleep would evade Victoria. She stood by the window, her silhouette stark against the soft glow of the moonlight. Outside, her wolf dogs prowled the perimeter, instinct sharpened by the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by a haunting howl from Delta. Victoria's heart raced as she grabbed her binoculars and scanned the tree line. Movement. 2 shadows crept near the fence. She focused, her finger already hovering over the radio button, prepared to alert her team. These were skilled intruders, no casual trespassers. "Stay alert," she whispered to Alpha and Beta, her heart pounding with excitement. These men were no mere scouts. They were here to test her defenses. As she watched, the intruders began to yank at the fence, taking measurements and snapping photos. They couldn't know the danger lurking just beyond them. Victoria swallowed hard, calculating their next move. They were navigating their territory, but she had transformed this land into a fortress of resilience. Suddenly, a rustle behind her caused her to pivot. One of her team members had entered, wide-eyed. "Victoria," he breathed, "we've got more company. 4 armed men, moving fast." With adrenaline surging, Victoria's commands rang out clear and precise. "Get everyone into position. We're not just going to defend, we're going to hunt." Tonight, the cartels had crossed into her territory, but their transformation into prey was about to begin. The game was no longer just about power. It was about who understood the land better, and she was prepared to remind them just how lethal a properly trained pack could be. The night swallowed her words as she set into motion her plans, knowing tomorrow would bring a reckoning for both her and the cartel. In this wild game of shadows, she would emerge as the last wolf standing. The storm was gathering, and the hunt was on. As Victoria Sullivan glanced out into the cold, moonlit expanse surrounding Silver Pine Ranch, her pulse quickened with anticipation. The wolf dogs at her side twitched with the same electric energy, their instincts honed and ready for the impending confrontation. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, a silent prelude to the clash that was to unfold. Victoria grabbed her rifle, the familiar weight reassuring in her hands. She looked over her shoulder at her father, Patrick, who was busy checking the communication devices. "We have to act fast. If they are here to scout, they'll return with backup. We need to show them that we're not an easy target." Patrick nodded, his eyes serious as he joined her at the window. "I'll radio the sheriff and get our people in position. We need eyes on every approach to the ranch." Moments later, there were a flurry of action, coordinating with Sheriff Thompson and the deputies who had gathered at the barn. Each member knew their role, the fortress of Silver Pine Ranch transforming into a tactical command center. Tension buzzed like static in the air, but amid the nerves, determination fueled their actions. "Everyone knows what to do," Victoria asserted, her voice cutting through the anxious energy. "We'll form a defensive perimeter and watch for any signs of movement. If they think they can intimidate us, they are mistaken. We'll turn their strategy against them." As darkness descended deeper, the cold seeped into Victoria's bones, but it only sharpened her focus. She felt the unmistakable thrill of the hunt coursing through her veins. It was sensation she had often experienced in the military, tracking shadows through the mountains. Now, she would be the hunter in her own territory. The radio crackled, Sheriff Thompson's voice breaking through. "Victoria, I've got eyes on the 2 intruders you spotted. They are moving closer, and it looks like they are trying to assess weaknesses in the south fence line." In the stillness that followed, Victoria raised her binoculars, steadying her breath. Through the lens, she saw the 2 men, their movement slick in practice, like wolves prowling. They were carefully scanning the perimeter, but what they didn't see were the vigilant eyes watching them from shadows. "Okay, everyone, on my command," Victoria said tightly, her heart racing. "Let's use the element of surprise." With a small nod from her father, they waited in the piercing silence. It was an eerie calm, as if the very land held its breath. Alpha, Beta, and Delta remained crouched low, their fur almost blending into the darkness. They were the perfect soldiers, equipped to strike without hesitation. As the intruders moved closer to the fence, Victoria whispered, "Now." In a flurry of motion, her team erupted from cover, flanking the startled scouts who hadn't anticipated such an organized response. Alpha, Beta, and Delta sprang forward, darting toward the intruders with deadly precision. "Hands where we can see them." Sheriff Thompson shouted as he moved in with his deputies, weapons drawn. The intruders froze, their expressions shifting from brazen confidence to palpable fear. Victoria stepped forward, eyes cold and calculating. "You've crossed into my territory. You wanted to intimidate? That's cute. But I think you've underestimated the people who call this land home." The intruders, realizing the gravity of their miscalculation, dropped their cameras and put their hands up. "We were just..." "Scouting for whom?" Victoria interrupted, cutting them off. "Speak quickly, or you'll find out just how dangerous this pack can be." Panic flashed across the face of the taller man. "We were just gathering intel for Los Ogulas," he stammered. "We didn't mean any harm." Victoria glanced at her father and Sheriff Thompson, the silent exchange of strategies playing out in her gaze. They were gathering information, and she could sense that more was at stake than just intimidation. They were laying the groundwork for a much larger invasion. The second intruder, glancing nervously at his partner, suddenly blurted out, "We were instructed to assess your defenses. They think you're an easy target, just a rancher and her dogs." One of the deputies stepped forward, his expression hardening. "And who exactly thinks that?" "Gabriel Moreno," the man stammered. "He has been watching from the outskirts, planning a proper assault with more men and resources." Victoria clenched her jaw, a surge of rage coursing through her. They were about to bring the fight to Riverstone, not just her ranch, and Gabriel Moreno was a puppet master orchestrating it all. "We need to get this information back to town," Patrick said, stepping beside Victoria. "This intel could change everything." She nodded, her thoughts racing. "We'll use them to lure out Moreno. Let him think he can come here and take what he wants. Instead, he'll find that we're more than prepared." With a quick motion, she pulled out her phone. "Let's get this on the record. I want evidence of every word they said." For the first time tonight, the intruders revealed their fears as Victoria began recording their conversation. The shadows of the night were thick, and it wasn't just the ranch's defenses they had underestimated. It was the spirit of Riverstone. As the men detailed plans and names, Victoria sensed the tide was shifting. They may have entered a territory with bravado, but she and her community would reclaim their power, driven by the resolve to protect what was theirs. Through the phone speaker, Sheriff Thompson's steady voice sounded. "Get a team together. We'll establish a blockade on the primary roads into town. No one gets through without our knowledge. They want a war. We'll give it to them on our terms." That night, under the relentless Montana stars, a plan was forged in fire and fury. Gabriel Moreno was coming, and thanks to the two men standing before her, they had gained critical foresight into the enemy's approach. Victoria could feel it. The hunt was beginning. They would not only fend off the cartel's advances, they would take the fight to the heart of Los Angeles. As dawn's first light crept across the horizon, illuminating the rugged landscape, the wolves howled in unison, a fierce declaration echoing through the valley, a proclamation that Riverstone would not bow, would not break, and would fight back with everything it had. Victoria's gaze hardened with determination. The intruders were no longer standing between her and the cartel. They were simply the first under her command. This was just the opening move in a game much larger than they had anticipated. With her wolves by her side and the community rallying behind her, victory was not just possible, it was inevitable. As dawn's first light crept across the horizon, illuminating the rugged landscape, the wolves howled in unison, a fierce declaration echoing through the valley, a proclamation that Riverstone would not bow, would not break, and would fight back with everything it had. Victoria's gaze hardened with determination. The intruders were no longer standing between her and the cartel. They were simply the first under her command. This was just the opening move in a game much larger than they had anticipated. "Let's move," Victoria commanded, her voice cutting through the morning chill that settled around the ranch. The urgency in her tone renewed the energy of her team. The newfound intel was a treasure trove, and they needed to act fast before Gabriel Moreno could uncover that his men had been compromised. As they loaded the two intruders into a patrol vehicle, Victoria leaned close to the taller man, glaring into his eyes. "You will cooperate fully. If you lie to us or try to escape, my wolves won't hesitate to treat you like any intruder. Understand?" The man nodded hesitantly, his bravado shattered. His partner beside him paled, sweat beading on his forehead. Victoria turned to her father and Sheriff Thompson. "We need to set up a command center back in Riverstone, gather all the information, and strategize our next move. I don't want any surprises. We need to anticipate their actions." In town, the atmosphere was electric yet tense as residents mobilized under a shared sense of purpose. Families who had once felt helpless in the face of the cartel's looming shadow now banded together, ready to reclaim their lives. The diner was filled with chatter as they formed committees, created supply lists, and assembled a defense plan. At the command center, Victoria laid out the information they'd extracted, mapping the roadways and potential entry points on a large whiteboard. She turned to her father, Sheriff Thompson, and Dr. Lee, who were poring over the notes and diagrams she compiled. According to our guests, she began, glancing toward the intruders who sat at a table under guard, Moreno plans to strike hard, aiming for Riverstone directly. They think we're vulnerable without Foundation support. We need to turn that assumption on its head. Jennifer leaned in, her brow furrowed in thought. We could set up decoys at the eastern side of the town, draw them into a trap, while we flank them from the west. Their own overconfidence will be their downfall. But we need to ensure every civilian is safe, Thompson interjected. They could retaliate if they realize they are being played. Agreed, Victoria responded, tapping a finger on the map, her mind racing. We'll evacuate vulnerable residents to the local church while reinforcing the eastern perimeter. I want every able-bodied person ready to fight. They need to know it's their home, too. As the plan solidified, an air of determination settled over the room. An unexpected knock broke the tension, and Marina Delgado stepped through the door, her expression a mix of resolve and urgency. I heard about your intel. You're taking the fight to them, aren't you? She asked, steel in her voice. Yes, Victoria replied, studying Marina's features. It's time we show them we won't be intimidated anymore. Count me in, Marina said without hesitation. I've lived under the shadow of the Vergaras for too long. I want to help expose their operations and assist in reclaiming our town. They won't stop until they think they own everything. With the unexpected alliance formed, the planning session continued. As they finalized details, Victoria felt an undeniable shift. The community was uniting behind a shared purpose. Before long, the sun hung high in the sky, a fiery beacon of hope against the shadows that had lingered for too long. Meanwhile, Gabriel Moreno was on the move. In his sleek black SUV, his eyes were hard with resolve as he directed his men. We hit Riverstone today. They think they've won because of their little tricks. We will crush them and send a message to the entire region that the Los Angeles Cartel will not be taken lightly. His right-hand man, Jorge, slightly hesitated. Are you sure we shouldn't slow down first? They might be preparing. There was a glint of rage in Gabriel's eyes. No. If we show even a hint of weakness, they'll never respect us again. We'll use overwhelming force and remind them who controls this territory. As Moreno's men accelerated toward Riverstone, their energy was tinged with the eagerness of a tiger preparing to pounce. They were fueled by the lie that they could still impose their will unchecked. Back in Riverstone, preparations reached a fever pitch. The sounds of construction, planning, and training melded with the laughter of children as families took a stand together. Victoria felt the camaraderie and resolve building. The town was rekindling its spirit. As night fell and the air turned crisp, Victoria and her team positioned themselves strategically, hidden yet ready. The road leading into Riverstone was quiet, the calm before the storm. Amidst the tension, she found strength in her wolves, their presence grounding yet electric. Remember, she whispered to Alpha, tonight we fight not just for our homes but for our families, our futures, and each other. We stand as one. Suddenly, a flash of headlights pierced the dark, illuminating the contours of the landscape. Victoria's heart raced. The cartel had arrived. Positions, she commanded, watching as shadowy figures emerged from the vehicles, menacing and intent on destruction. As the first wave of Morinos stepped into the open, Victoria signaled her team. Now! The night erupted in action. Her carefully orchestrated plan was about to be put to the test. As the first shots were fired, the howls of her wolves filled the air, a haunting chorus that mixed with the shouts of combatants, a symphony of chaos. Victoria moved swiftly through the shadows, a seasoned hunter among her pack. Each step was fueled by the ferocity of a warrior ready to reclaim her land. The initial moments of terror quickly shifted into strategy as the defenders fought back, each action a calculated response to the enemy's advances. As chaos reigned, Victoria inhaled the electric air of battle. She could feel the presence of her wolves guiding her, leading the way as they hunted the hunters, a reversal of roles that none could have anticipated. "Push them back!" she shouted into the night, rallying her team, her voice filled with power amid the clamor of conflict. "We won't let them take our home." With every well-placed move and tactical advantage, they fought not just for safety but for pride. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, illuminating both blood and victory, they would know that Riverstone was not just a town. It was an indomitable force, forged in unity, ready to reclaim its territory. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, illuminating both blood and victory, the defenders of Riverstone stood united, their spirits unwavering against the tide of darkness that Moreno had unleashed. In the chaos of the clash, a fierce determination coursed through Victoria. Each howl of her wolves was a call to arms, strengthening their resolve even as the battle raged around them. With the sun rising, shedding a golden hue over the remnants of the night's confrontation, she could see their strategy unfolding before her. The enemy had come with overwhelming force, but the heart of Riverstone was proving an indomitable fortress. As gunfire rang out and the sounds of struggle echoed, Victoria regained her focus, rallying her team. "Push forward!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "We need to reclaim the eastern flank." The defenders surged, adrenaline fueling their resilience. They were no longer mere ranchers or townsfolk. They had transformed into guardians, united under the banner of survival. Victoria felt the weight of their shared courage driving her, lifting her above the fear and uncertainty that had once clouded her mind. Jorge, one of Moreno's men, struggled to regroup his forces, confusion spreading across his face as he witnessed the tenacity with which the townspeople fought back. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he yelled, trying to rally the remaining men. "Get them under control." But the fervor of Riverstone's defenders sparked a fire that Jorge couldn't extinguish. As they pushed against the advancing threat, Victoria spotted a glint of steel rise before her. It was Gabriel, fuming and determined, rallying his men with fierce determination. In that moment, everything snapped into focus for Victoria. Moreno hadn't just come to challenge her ranch. He had come for the very soul of Riverstone, and she refused to let him tarnish it any longer. Drawing in a deep breath, she assessed their surroundings. Strategy, she reminded herself. They needed to seize the upper hand. With a fierce resolve, Victoria signaled for her wolves, their instincts syncing with Hayes. Together, they moved like shadows through the chaos, a fluid unit of strength and strategy. "Make a diversion," Victoria instructed her team, her voice low but commanding. "We need to draw their attention away from the eastern flanks. Get close to their vehicles, force them to react." In a synchronized effort, they launched a series of calculated distractions, creating a raucous commotion that pulled the cartel focus. As Moreno's men scrambled, Victoria led a small group through the trees, flanking the disoriented enemy with an agile maneuver that took advantage of the terrain. Underneath the canopy, they burst forth, a wave of shouts and growls overwhelming Moreno's men. It was a tactical ambush, and they had expected nothing less. "Now!" Victoria shouted, her heart pounding, and the world transformed into a whirlwind of resolve and fury. They clashed, defenders spiraling into the fray with a rush of power. The defenders embraced the chaos, backlit by the rising sun as they fought not just to survive but to reclaim their town. Victoria moved at the forefront, her rifle steady, her eyes sharp. In her heart burned an inferno, a desire to protect her home and those she loved. One by one, the cartel began to falter, their ranks diminished by the ferocity of Riverstone's fight. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the battlefield, the tide began to shift. Moreno's men, once cocky and confident, now faced a raw, undeterred spirit of community that wouldn't bow to intimidation. Amidst the struggle, Victoria's gaze locked with Gabriel's as he desperately fought against the tide of defeat. "You think you can win," he sneered, attempting to regain control. With fierce determination, Victoria replied, "No, Gabriel, we know we already have." Adrenaline surged through her as she charged forward, fierce and unyielding. The two clashed, a whirlwind of strength and will, each blow echoing the weight of their opposing desires, his to conquer, Hayes to protect. They were locked in a dance of destiny, each moment steeped in the bitter taste of their encounters. With a focused strike, Victoria pushed Gabriel back, her instinct guiding her as she pressed on. In the whirlwind of the fight, she felt her wolves beside her, a potent reminder of her strength. Finally, her momentum shifted the tide. Gabriel found himself cornered, his composure broken as panic flickered across his face. "You won't get away with this," he gasped, desperation clawing at his throat. But Victoria stood tall, unyielding. This is where it ends for you and your cartel. Riverstone won't tolerate your threats. Not now, not ever. With that, she motioned to the deputies, a signal that sealed his fate. They encircled him, capturing the very embodiment of their fears and struggles. Moreno's grip on Riverstone was finally broken, and as dawn's light poured over them, a sense of liberation washed through the defenders. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the cries of victory mingled with the soft whispers of relief, Victoria turned to her father and the townsfolk gathered around. The fatigue evident in their expressions only highlighted the strength they had found in one another. "We did it," she breathed, a sense of disbelief washing over her. It wasn't just a fight. It was a reclamation of their identity, a declaration that they would no longer live under the shadows cast by fear. "Yes, we did," Patrick replied, his arm resting around her shoulder, pride glimmering in his eyes. "You led them, Victoria. You brought them together." As they glanced around, neighbors embraced, children offered timid smiles, and the spirit of the community filled the air, a radiant tapestry woven together by shared experiences and the strength of their bonds. The sun rose higher, illuminating the battered remnants of a battle fought tooth and nail. But rather than mourning what had been lost, they looked forward, determined to rebuild and forge a brighter future. "From here on out," Victoria declared, standing tall, "we will build Riverstone into a stronger community, an unbreakable family. We will protect one another and ensure the darkness never finds its way here again." Cheers erupted in the air, mixing with the howls of the loyal wolves, a chorus of hope rising to greet the dawn. At that moment, under the sprawling Montana sky, Riverstone transformed. It became not just a place on a map, but a beacon of resilience, an enduring legacy of unity and strength, with Victoria at its helm. The battle had been won, but the war against darkness continued, and Victoria knew with unwavering certainty they were ready to face whatever came next, together. The future was theirs to shape, and they would not falter